The bandwidth for the Wild Paw Dog podcast this week was sponsored by Dougal's Den, www.dougalsden.co.uk. Amazing finds for the furry kind. So I'm John Buskell.
And I'm Karen Wild.
And this is the podcast that gives you help and advice on how to train your dog.
In this week's show, we have a look at whether dog kennels actually do make a happy holiday and some of the alternatives that you can do when you go away and can't take your pooch with you.
Well, we're back again, Karen.
Yes, I know. It's been a bit of a break.
Yes, and now you're married.
I am. Yes, I'm actually Karen Gadd now. That's my married name, but just for convenience, and it's also the same name as my children. I'm still Karen Wild to everybody, so it gets a bit confusing on checkbooks and things. But other than that, it's fine. So yeah, very happy. Good. And congratulations, and it's good to hear that you're still wild at heart.
Yeah,
well, some might say.
Well, if you're a regular listener, thanks very much for downloading the show and coming back to hear what we've got to say. And if you're a new listener, just finding us, I hope you'll explore the back catalogue and check out some of the things that Karen and I have been talking about over the weeks. We're up to podcast number 27, Karen.
I know, 27. In fact, we were just talking about this. There's somebody contacted me the other day asking if I'd done anything on stopping your dog pulling on a lead, for example. And we did a really bumper podcast on that a little while ago, as well as a blog on my site. So, please do. If you've got a burning issue, by all means, send us an email to podcast@karenwild.co.uk and, ask questions. But also do have a look back, because there's some nice little things that you could listen to, maybe help you while you're on your dog walk, with your headphone in your ear sort of thing from your iPhone or whatever. And it might actually help you while you're out and about with your dog. So by all means, check those out. They're all listed on iTunes.
All right, Karen, then let's talk about dogs and holidays.
Dogs and holidays. It's that time of year, isn't it? If you haven't already booked somewhere for your dog to go, then you need to get a move on. The best places always book up really quickly. And it used to be, first of all, it didn't used to be an issue because people didn't used to go abroad that much. Now a lot more people are going on holiday abroad, or they're going to places where dogs aren't welcome. And sadly, there are places where dogs aren't welcome to go. And sadly, I think as I'm learning, it seems to be increasing, which is awful. So when you go on holiday, you want to make sure that your dog or dogs are looked after by somebody. And there's lots and lots of different options. But my biggest question would be, first of all, how do you know what is the best option for your dog? I think you said, John, you don't go away because of your dogs. Am I right?
Well, yeah, that is typically when my wife has been over to Japan to visit our son over there. I've stayed behind, but this year I've I've agreed. We've hired a house in France, and we have 5 basset hounds here. And a couple of weeks away in the south of France, not taking any dogs. And actually, it's been really something on my mind what to do. Now, I've got an 18-year-old who's staying at home over the summer with a really big house. And he's agreed to look after some of the dogs. But I am actually thinking, what should I do with a couple of them? Because maybe 5 are although he's used to helping out with them. And he's very, very good with them, and he's very responsible. I do think, what could I do with 2 of them?
Yeah, and I think, straight away I can hear in your voice, welfare is quite an issue. And actually, it brings me on to something that really made me start to think about this week, where a boarding kennels, which is actually based in my village. It's not a very big village. It's a boarding and was a breeding kennel down the end of the fen, which is the sort of on the way out of the village. And in our local community, we're quite close, we like to think. And we were horrified to read that a breeder, that actually runs the kennels has been convicted of, and they've admitted it actually to 14 charges of cruelty for the dogs in their care. Now, on the boarding side, things looked okay, although I'd had mixed reports from clients about them. But then I always get that. So, that's just something that I'm used to. But their own dogs were actually starving, and were found several of them dead. And it was just awful. Yeah. And it was honestly, John, they are literally a dog walk down the road. And, you know, you hear noise from the kennels because it's kennels. They've got planning permission. Obviously, the council have approved it. But, you know, the dogs were left without food. They were in very filthy conditions. And as they quoted it in the newspaper, they described the owner as an experienced and professional dog owner. So that makes me think immediately, getting my alarm bells ringing, thinking, how can we know that our kennels or wherever we're having our dogs looked after are going to be good? You know, how do you know? Because if somebody has the license, they have the you know, the front of house looks really good, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the background. And obviously our dogs are part of our family. That's one of the mainstays of this podcast, isn't it, that our dogs are really central to our family lives. So you want to make sure that your dog's going to be looked after if you leave it somewhere. So I can understand your concerns there with your dogs. And you know, so I thought it would be really useful to bring up some of the options. I asked some of the guys on Twitter as well, because you're all fantastic. You come back with your ideas and your opinions and recommendations, which is great. And straight away, the first thing I asked people on Twitter about was, you know, what about taking the dog with you? You know, there are places that will accommodate pets. You do have to find them. But as long as your pet is reasonably well behaved, then, you know, then you can find places to go on holiday where they will let your pet come and stay with you, you know, your dog usually, but sometimes they'll even allow cats and other things. And straight away, I had about half a dozen people say the Dogs Trust have a Welcome Cottages link on their website straight away. So where dogs are welcome, they've linked up with the Dogs Trust, and I believe there might be some kind of fundraising thing going on there. So I've put the link on my blog. If you're looking for somewhere where you want to go on holiday, but that also will let you take your dogs with you, go to the Dogs Trust website or come to my blog and go through the link. You can find somewhere and help the Dogs Trust at the same time.
Oh, what
so that's brilliant.
That's a really, really good idea. I mean, I can see that would work. Here in Sweden, we have these things called stuga, and they are wooden cottages. Usually get a whole bunch of them together, often next to a camping field. And of course, in Sweden, actually, it's waving the Swedish flag. It's really, really high quality, really good showers, really, really fabulous toilets. And in your stuga, a small wooden house, you can have dogs. So that's what a lot of people who holiday in Sweden or in Scandinavia, in Norway, it's hytta. If you go on a hytta tour or if you go on a stuga tour, you can take your dog with. And I think that's what the majority of people here do. But I have never heard of a kennel acting like that over here. We have people that go around and check kennels, but I'm assuming that you have that in the UK too.
Yeah, I think, I think in this particular instance, and again, this is a guess. It's not absolutely fact, because I do know from what my clients have told me, because they are in the village and obviously we all talk to one another. There are two halves to that particular property. One is the boarding kennel property, which is the part that gets inspected by the council, and the other half was their private kenneling part. And they used to, I'm fairly certain they used to breed dogs, different sorts of breeds from time to time, or whether they were their own pet dogs, but there were enough of them to be in kennels of a similar design, and it was those dogs that were actually suffering. So it wasn't the boarding kennel side. So when you think about it, the front of house looked really good, and if you took your animal there, you would hope that it would be looked after, and you could probably look around. But behind the scenes, there were dogs starving to death, and it's just horrifying. So you just don't know. And let's not get paranoid about it. There were some great recommendations I got on Twitter. So you might think, right, that's it, I'm taking my dog with me. The other part of this, of course, is the pet passport, which has now become possible in the UK, where you can take your dog abroad with you. I'm not an expert on the pet passport. There is a lot of ins and outs to it, and a lot more people more qualified than I am to sort of discuss it in detail. You do need to give it plenty of time, because the dogs have to have particular sets of vaccinations, and they have to be checked to be immune to things, particularly rabies is the one that they're particularly worried about bringing into the UK, because we don't have rabies here in the UK.
Well, I can say because Dearborn, or AKA Stan is going to the UK in November to a lovely family, and he had to have two rabies vaccinations, sort of a month between the two, and then he has to go for a blood test on Friday to check the antibodies in his system, and then from that date, it's 6 months before he can get his passport made and he can go into the country. I'm not I'm not taking my dogs with me down to France. I couldn't take 5 dogs in a Toyota anyway.
Yeah.
But do you know, the other thing is, I think I need a bit of time away from them. I take care of 5 dogs on a daily basis, and, you know, I've had a couple of days away from them. And I don't like the idea of them being in a car traveling, because I'm driving all the way down to France from Stockholm. Don't like the idea of that. So some of the things that I've been doing, I've been asking people for recommendations if there is a good kennel, and I've not been convinced. I know a couple who I used to buy organic dog food from, and they live up just in, I mean, you go 2 minutes down my road and you're in the middle of nowhere, despite me being 20 minutes from the centre of the city. They had a kennel. I used to get organic food from them, but unfortunately they've just closed down the kennel side of their business. They've got young children. They both are very qualified trainers. They're fabulous people. That would have been a possibility. I've also approached people that I know that already have Bassets, some good friends of mine. But that's an imposition, and so I like to have things on a professional basis. So what I'm actually thinking about as one option, Karen, is hiring someone to not live in my house, but come to my house daily and let Leva take care of 3 of the dogs, but have a professional walker and dog care person come in twice a day to activate them, take them on a long walk, make sure they get good food, make sure they get cleaned out.
Well, this is where Twitter exploded with people, because obviously there's lots and lots of us in a little sort of group on Twitter. Well, it's quite a big group now, actually. And hello, everybody. Where, you know, there's pet sitters, there's dog walkers, there's home boarders. I myself am a council licensed home boarder, where the numbers are limited. You can either have a dog to stay in your home, so obviously you have limited numbers, otherwise you become a kennels and you have a whole load of other regulations, or you can get someone, as you suggest, to come in into your home. And I would love to know, in fact I'd love to hear from our US listeners as well, and listeners elsewhere overseas, how do you do it? Because obviously we're talking here from a UK perspective, but I do have an awful lot of friends overseas and a lot of dog walkers, and in the US they seem to be so far ahead of us in what they're doing. They've really got it sussed out. You know, the dogs are really, pet sitters, dog walkers seem to have been around an awfully long time. So, you know, yeah, if you have a lot of pets, I think it's quite cost effective to get someone to come and stay in your house. Now, if you've got someone living in your house overnight anyway, John, then that would be slightly different. But I think a lot of pet sitters prefer, particularly with dogs, they like to be in the home all the time, because an overnight, you know, is important. When you've got cats or rabbits and things like that, sometimes I think the law might treat it slightly differently. But it does mean, and this is the really good thing, that your pets are really not disrupted very much at all.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
yeah, yes, they miss you, but everything else stays pretty much the same. And, you know, you don't have the car sickness on a holiday journey. If you do, it can be helped. So please do go over the blog and see there's other stuff on there from our IntelliDogs website. But it does mean that your pets pretty much stay as they are with the same routine, different person maybe, but you know, that's not a bad thing. And like I say, if you've got a lot of pets, not just dogs, you know, you've got cats, you've got rabbit, you've got hamsters, you know, you're generally an animal-y type person like I am, that can be a really, really good option. There are registers of pet sitters. I don't know how checked out they are, but you can do, you know, what you'd expect to see, CRB checks that are recent, you know, up to date, CRB check, an extended CRB check, which is the Criminal Records Bureau. You know, those kinds of things. Make sure you've checked out their insurance, recommendations, testimonials, but not just a few. You want lots, because it's quite easy to get 1 or 2 good recommendations. You need to have lots and lots and lots, and then I would start to look at it. There's a guy around here, he's a retired policeman, he does it, and he you know, he's very sensible, very down to earth, and that works well for me. I think that's a good idea.
And what he does is he does boarding, does he, or does he come and live?
No, he would come and live at your home. Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say I've not heard of that very much over here, to be honest. I think it's because Sweden's actually quite a dog-friendly country. The kennels that we have are, you know, I think they have such a high standard. The ones that I've seen, like I said, I've not heard any bad stuff. And I do think that that it tends to be, because I'm a breeder. People will say to me, if I buy one of your dogs and I go away in the summer, can the dog board with you? And often that happens too. I often take dogs in to board too, because I have good facilities. You know, that's
Yeah, and that's actually quite popular over here as well. A lot of my clients will say, well, the breeders just said they'll have them back. That's fantastic. The sign of a really good breeder, great.
I have a question though. If you have, I mean, I understand that these lists, these official lists, are really useful to have. But as with this incident with the kennel that had been checked out, you cannot trust them. If you are listening to the show and you are someone that comes in and lives in the house and takes care of the dog, I'd be really curious to know how you go about convincing people. How could either send us an email to podcast@intellidogs.com or record something on your phone and send us the sound file. I would really love to know how you convince someone, how you go about genuinely showing that you're the person that can come into a house for a week or 2 weeks, look after the dogs, not run away with the family. Do you know what I'm saying, Karen?
Yeah, it's funny actually, because one of the tweets that I got from Leslie Tither, she sent me some information about animal aunts. She mentioned who she had come to her house to look after one of her dogs, and she said they were fabulous. She said they were so professional. She got an end of term report written, very happy dog at the end, and the company is still going. So obviously they've been trading rather for quite a long time. So if there's any stink around, then normally you would have heard of it by now. That would be very interesting. The other option, which is similar to this, of course, is home boarding, which is obviously what I do. Now, there is a slight difference because you're taking the dog from its normal environment and you're putting it in someone else's home. You're not putting it into a kennel. It's coming to a house with a family. So there are obvious stipulations. And I have dogs that come to us regularly. They've been coming for years, since they were puppies, and they are like just other members of the family, like favourite aunts or cousins or something. They come and stay. They know the routine. They know the layout of the house. Yes, there's always a day where day and a half where they have to adjust a little bit. But you can see they run straight to the back door. They know the way out to the garden the minute they walk in the house. So it is a home from home for a lot of these dogs. So I would urge you, if you regularly go away and you don't like the idea of a pet sitter, then a home boarder that you can build up quite a nice relationship with is a good idea. And I'm not selling myself here. I just think that I see the dogs come in. I only board generally smaller dogs, although I've got a couple of really big dogs, but I've had them since forever. So, they keep coming. But it's suited to our lifestyle. The kids are fine with them. The dogs are used to the kids. They're used to the cat. They're used to the routine of the house. You have to have enough rooms as a home boarder to make sure that you've got, if one of the dogs gets ill, you can isolate it. And there are regulations that the council come out and check your house, and they will say, you've got to have a secure garden. But you can go yourself and do that as well. That you don't just need to rely on a council report. And I think that works out good in a good way. You're not letting someone into your house. Your house is all locked up, but your dogs are somewhere in a family home, so it's not that they're in a concrete pen somewhere. So I think that works quite nicely.
What if
behaviourally, probably not as good as staying in your own place, but it works well. Sorry, you were going to say.
I'm going to say, what if things go wrong? What if you get a dog come to you and it starts eating your wall? It starts getting super, super stressed because it's away. You read a dog really well, Karen. So what do you do in that situation? With the owner in the south of France.
Yeah. Well, that's happened twice over the whole time that I've been doing this. What I always get the owner to be as honest with me as possible and fill out as much information as possible in their form. So I'm quite thorough. And sometimes it's only for a short stay to begin with. If they've got any concerns at all, I always recommend a short stay to begin with first before they go abroad, because once they're abroad, like you say, that's it. I do have clauses in my contract that if a dog, for whatever reason, shows signs of aggression or anything that I believe that it might harm itself or it might be dangerous to someone else, then I have the option to take that dog, and usually I arrange emergency numbers over here with their family that they can sort it out. So if we do have a problem, then I can deal with it straight away. And that also includes veterinary emergency, those sorts of things. So you have to have, if you're going to a boarder, they need to be asking you all these things, because things can go wrong. Things don't always work out. And sometimes you might find a dog's absolutely fine in one environment and not in another. But generally, owners are very honest with me. And if I've got a dog if they haven't been honest with me and the dog destroys something because they've said, oh, no, it's fine to leave it in its crate or whatever, and that's not a problem. And then I come in and the dog's kind of hurt itself or it's broken out of the crate and scratched something. To be honest, I don't think that's happened. it's only happened once where a dog did scratch something and the owner straight away said, I didn't know they were going to do that, and they immediately offered to pay for the damage. Well, that's not, that's not a big deal. That's fine. They are dogs after all. But what owners have to understand is it is somebody's home. So if they have concerns, then it's better to air those concerns before you go away.
I think the good advice there is also to organise a short stay before. That's the key thing. Check someone out. Ask for references. Ask to actually talk to someone, not just to get a written reference. Could I just get can I speak to someone on the phone that's, had a dog stay with you? How did it get on? And I do think that if people who run boarding houses for dogs, who take them in, if they start to get a bit sort of reticent about sharing information, then that sort of sends out warning signals, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also be honest with yourself. If you've got a dog that is destructive, or one that suffers separation anxiety, or one that doesn't like being shut in. There are times when I'm mopping the floor, even though I use a proper kennel disinfectant, I don't want the dogs to walk over it. So I have to shut them in one room because I can't let them walk all over it while the floor's wet. Even though I use a safe one that's okay for them to walk on while it's wet, I don't like the idea of it. So I have to shut them in rooms. I have to go out sometimes. If you know that your dog does not respond well to that, you have to tell your home boarder.
Sure.
You do. It's a two-way process.
So what happens, Karen, if let's say you live on your own and you get ill, you break your leg and you can't walk your dog and you can't take care of it and you can't find a boarder and you're forced to put the dog into kenneling. What happens there?
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not intending to say, kennels are really bad, because I think it's really up to your personal preference. I had one behaviourist colleague who said to me, oh, it's not behaviourally suited to the dog. And I think, I can understand that. But like you say, sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes some dogs, they're not that bothered. They're quite laid back and they really don't mind. So kennels are cheaper. If they're kept clean and whatever the dog is, they're looked after. Their welfare is kept at a certain level, so it's an acceptable level. So, I mean, I talked to Sophie, who tweeted me yesterday on Twitter, sent me a message, and she basically described a kennel she used to work at, and she said, owners, they also did daycare. Owners would drop their dogs off. The yard had a special section for them with a garden, detached areas if the dog didn't mix with others, but, walked twice a day, played with, given dinner, went home when the owners picked them up, either during the day or after a holiday. That might be a really nice environment. So just because we've got in our head, kennels is a pen and that's all they're in. No, there are kennels that will let the dogs mix. They have paddocks where the dogs can mix. And as long as somebody's supervising it and you've been honest with them to say, yeah, my dog's actually really good with other dogs, there's somebody watching them all the time. So it might be a really good option. So, of course, the usual advice applies. Like you've just said, find out recommendations, drop into a kennels unannounced. If you have to make an appointment, make sure you have a really good look round. Make sure you get proper answers and don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask other dog owners, where their dogs go. Do check their council inspections are up to date, and you can check whether they've had any notices to make amendments to things as well. So if the council have spotted something and said, right, you've got to deal with that, you've got to repair that door or whatever, then make sure that is all up to date. But I think once you've found your kennels, you relax quite a bit. And I think that is something that, is a good relationship then can build up with the kennels and the kennel staff. And I think that's then going to be a better environment for your dog long term. Of course it will be. I think the thing is that what we're saying here is that there are options out there and that we're not prejudging what option you choose, but it's important to look at each of these solutions given the facilities available to you, the options available in your area, the kind of dog you have, the temperament of your dog. All these things need to be taken into concern. And I think both Karen and I would really love to hear from you if you run kennels, boarding kennels, or if you're a home boarder, or even if you're someone who comes in on a daily basis to help care for a dog. I'd really like to hear about that too, because we'd like comments and stuff. There might be other options that we haven't considered, of course. We've only gone with what is within my range of sort of knowledge, but there are probably other ideas out there that people have got. And I think, this is your dog. It is part of the family. To a lot of people, they're a very big part of the family. So the more ideas we get, the more we can share this information, the better it's going to be for us, the better it's going to be for our dogs. The other thing I would like to add, John, which I think is something that everybody should be doing to ensure your dog against this kind of stress reaction that we are worrying about, is to make sure that your dog learns to spend time on its own without you, without its litter mates or doggy family that it lives with, that it does get time to be on its own in a nice environment where it can occupy itself with something tasty or fun. Because if you don't provide that insurance, when you finally do take the old dog off to the kennels, it's going to not be able to amuse itself at all. You may end up with a dog with a severe barking problem or any other kind of stress related problem. You need to make sure that your dog is really bomb proof. And I talk about that all the time. I see lots of dogs that aren't like that. I want you to make sure that your dog is. And it's also for the safety of the kennel staff, because if your dog is feeling very stressed, then they're more likely to do things like bite, growl. That's not a good thing for the kennel staff either. So do, make a point of behaviourally sort of ensuring your dog, make sure that your dog is happy to be with other people and doesn't mind being walked by people they don't know, and good with other dogs, and, perfect scenario if you can get it, but do put the effort in. It's well worth it.
Karen, what happens if your dog comes back to you and has problems? It started barking. It's, because I've had people say to me, never put your dogs in kennels. They're never the same. My dog was never the same after it had been away. What do you, what's your response to something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something, obviously, in my job, I do see that quite a lot. And sometimes you can relate it back to one instance where there was one dog that was it was a bit of a mix-up, and they tried to blame the kennel owner. I don't believe it was the kennel owner's fault. I think they hadn't prepared the dog enough as well. So I think let's be fair. But the dog had growled at the kennel owner, and the kennel owner had been a bit sort of shouty with the dog, and the dog had gone for him, and he sort of dived behind the door, and it was all a bit horrible when the people were abroad and hadn't left a UK contact. So it was difficult, not a very nice situation for anybody. I think that dog had been coming up to that for quite a while. I do get a lot of people say, my dog really sulks when they come back from kennels. But I don't know if sulking is part of their repertoire. But I do think that stress reaction is something that dogs will do. And readjustment is something you need to give them time for. So, they've been in one environment, then they go into another environment, and then they come back home again, and they're a bit like, well, things are different again. I'm just getting used to it. So give it a couple of days before you put too much pressure on the poor dog. And then if you are concerned, do ring a professional and speak to them straight away. Things might go away on their own. But if it's something fairly acute, fairly severe, you really want to get somebody in quite quickly. And I know I would say that, but I've seen it where it's been left too long, and then we've ended up with a really big problems to sort out rather than a few little niggles that could probably be sorted out in a week or so.
All right then, Karen, I think this is a topic that we will return to again and again because it's such a big, important topic. And like we said, we'd love to hear from you if you run kennels or a home boarder, and share your comments with us. You can contact us on Twitter, and that's @wildpaw, or you can send us an email to podcast@intellidogs.com. I'd just like to point out, though, that we will not include commercial links. If you're a kennel or a home boarder trying to promote your business, we won't do that because it's not really, we don't think that that's fair. And any of the discussion today that Karen has talked about her own boarding, that's really just to give you an insight into how a home boarder goes about that. Isn't that right, Karen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the other thing I said it right at the start as well. I mean, you need to get in quick because people book up very quickly. The best people book up fast. I'm not advertising vacancies because I haven't got any. So that's quite nice for me. But what I'm trying to say is, do your homework and do it in plenty of time so that you're not stressing out at the last minute and end up with something that probably isn't very good.
Okay. So that's about it for this week. But before we go, we've got... What have we got, Karen?
We've got our regular correspondent. He is becoming, the regular correspondent for the podcast. He gives us all the news. We can't always understand it, but I'm sure the dogs around are going to understand it. And I am still being told that every time we have a dog on the show, that everyone's dog likes to join in. So let's have Marley.
Well, one thing that gets me there, Marley, is that it sounds like you're echoing. Or that you're double barking.
Well, it might be Marley and Lola, because Lola also shares the house with Marley. But Marley, apparently that was Squirrel. I'd like to be able to interpret it myself, but I have to rely on Marley's the typist, who tells us all about Marley. So that is Squirrel. So all of the dogs, if you're joining in, then I'm hoping that we can all get this mental picture of all of the dogs hearing another dog going, "Squirrel, squirrel, 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 squirrel," and hopefully not driving you all too mad. Sorry about that, but I just had to share it because I think it's so great. Please send us your dog barks. It's just, we love hearing them. That's what we're talking about on the podcast all the time. We're talking about our dogs, so let's feature a dog, and your dog might be, the starring dog of the podcast one week.
All right, then. Well, like I said at the beginning, if you're a regular listener, thanks very much for coming by. If you love the show, do please write us a review on iTunes. Just search for Wild Boar Dog Podcast on iTunes. Or actually, if you Google it, it will take you straight to the page on the internet. I think we're actually quite high up there. And if you're looking for more in-depth training advice, why not build your own training manual tailored to your needs? And that's at Karen's website, www.intellidogs.com. If you'd like to inquire about website design or online marketing services, including podcasts, please contact me. And you can find my contact details at jontusmedia.com. And I'll spell that for you. It's JONTUS media.com. So until next time, Karen, let's remember to be nice to our woofs.
Be nice to your woofs and be nice to yourself, because it's a team effort.
The Wild Boar Dog Podcast this week was sponsored by Dougal's Den, www.dougalsden.co.uk. Amazing finds for the furry kind.